The long arc of harassment, assault, and murder of Palestinians by Jewish settlers is twinned with a shadow history, one of silence, avoidance, and abetment by Israeli officials. For many of those officials, it is Palestinian terrorism that
Yeah, why do Israeli officials abet this bad behavior? Because they see it as being in Jewish Israel's best interests.
most threatens Israel. But in interviews with more than 100 people, current and former officers of the Israeli military, the National Israeli Police, and the Shin Bet Domestic Security Service, high-ranking Israeli political officials, including 4 former prime ministers, Palestinian leaders and activists, Israeli human rights lawyers, American officials charged with supporting the Israeli-Palestinian partnership, we found a different and perhaps even more destabilizing threat.
So they have no interest. They don't even ask the question, what's in Jewish Israel's best interests? Why are West Bank settlers acting this way? Like, how would it be rationally, evidentially in their interest to behave this way?
Long history of crime without punishment, many of those officials now say, threatens not only Palestinians living in the occupied territory.
Right. So they take this classical liberal perspective that what most matters are certain inalienable rights that were all supposedly given as individuals. And why aren't West Bank Jewish Israeli settlers respecting the inalienable rights of these Palestinians? But these Palestinians on the West Bank are not citizens of Israel, right? States do not accord rights to non-citizens, right? The rights are not some universal, right? There's no such thing as global human rights, right? It's become trendy in political discourse over the past 50 years, but historically rights have been thought about as that which a state grants its citizens. Why would you expect a state here, the Jewish state of Israel, to be granting rights to non-citizens, the Palestinians in the West Bank? Israel took over the West Bank when it was attacked by 5 Arab armies in 1967. And so Israel fought back to stay alive. In the process, they drove back these Arab armies, and they became then settled with millions or hundreds of thousands of people who hated it. So why would you then expect Israel to extend rights to a group that hates you and is not a citizen of your nation state?
But also the state of Israel itself. Many of the people we interviewed, some speaking anonymously, some speaking publicly for the first time.
So the authors of this article see this West Bank settler violence as a threat to the existence of the Jewish state of Israel, but it's a threat to the existence of a particular conception of the Jewish state of Israel. So when people say Donald Trump is a threat to whom? Threat to certain conceptions of the United States of America. For other people who have other conceptions of the United States of America, they see Donald Trump as a champion, right? People align their politics with their identity and what they see as in their best interests.
Offered an account not only of Jewish violence against Palestinians dating back decades, but also of an Israeli state that has systematically and increasingly ignored that violence.
Right. It is violence committed against people who are not citizens of that state, that the state does not want them around. The state wants them to leave, but no other nation wants Palestinians, because when Palestinians immigrate, they create chaos.
It is an account of a sometimes criminal nationalistic movement that has been.
Right. If you're not wanted, right, why don't you move to some place where you are wanted? But nobody wants them because the Palestinians don't have a history that would encourage other people to want them.
Allowed to operate with impunity and gradually move from the fringes to the mainstream of Israeli society.
Right. You belong to a group that consistently behaves in a manner that discourages any other community from taking you in. There's going to be a huge price to pay, but that price that you're paying, that's because of the actions, the behaviors, the history, the trajectory of your group, right? You are suffering because of your group, your people. It's history of disruption and chaos wherever it's gone. It's lack of accomplishment.
It is an account of how voices within the government that objected to the condoning of settler violence were silenced and discredited. And it is a blunt account, told for the first time by Israeli officials themselves, of how the occupation came to threaten the integrity of their country's democracy.
So do you think that what's most important about your people or your people's survival or your nation, your tribe, your nation state is some theoretical integrity, some ideological integrity, some philosophical integrity, some political integrity? Or do you have much more concern for flesh and blood people, their survival, and their thriving, right? We all try to create the optimal environment for our own group's survival. Whether or not it accords with the principles enunciated by John Locke in the 17th century. The tribal national perspective doesn't seem to get much attention from the New York Times.
The interviews, along with classified documents written in recent months, reveal a government at war with itself. One document describes a meeting in March when Major General Yehuda Fuchs.
So is the government really at war with itself, or does the government, for various reasons, need to put forward an image, to take a position, to present a policy and an ideology, all right, that is contradictory to the nation's best interests, right? Israel has self-interested reasons for presenting itself as a liberal democracy so that it can count on the support of other liberal democracies. But it also has self-interested, rational, empirical reasons for not behaving as a liberal democracy with regard to these Palestinians who are not citizens of the Jewish state of Israel.
The head of Israel's Central Command, responsible for the West Bank, gave a withering account of the efforts by Bezalel Smotrich, an ultra-right leader and the official in Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government with oversight over the West Bank, to undermine law enforcement in the occupied territory. Since Smotrich took office, Fuchs wrote, the effort to clamp down on illegal settlement construction has dwindled to the point where it has disappeared.
Could that have something to do with the Jewish state of Israel seeing it as rationally in its interest to build up more settlements and to drive out people who hate it? Why would any people, why would any tribe, why would any nation, why would any nation state, why would any country not want to drive out people who hate it?
Moreover, Fuchs said, Smotrich and his allies were thwarting the very measures to enforce the law that the government had promised Israeli courts it would take.